Welcome to the GCN Racing News Show. Coming up this week, with all the preparation races done and dusted, I'll be discussing who the favourites are to win the Tour de France. I'll also be looking back at the Tour de Suisse, the Route d'Occitanie, the concluding stage of the Baby Giro, the Tours of Slovenia and the Philippines, plus a former classic star and Tour de France stage winner completes the famous race across America. It was Team Ineos who were once again hitting the headlines at the Tour de Suisse last week, both for good reasons and for bad. Just days after Chris Froome's untimely exit from the Dauphiné, Geraint Thomas added to their list of woes, crashing heavily on stage 4 and subsequently withdrawing from the race. Thankfully, for both Thomas and the team, his injuries were not as severe as first feared. He'd taken a knock to the head and we monitored for the effects of concussion. In true Thomas style, he simply said he'd now need to do some bigger training rides this coming week. It could be a worry for the Welshman though, who will likely only have 23 days of racing in his legs when he sets about defending his Tour de France title in less than 2 weeks' time. That is significantly fewer than most recent winners of the race, including himself last year. His best results since last year's Tour have been a third place at the Tour de Romandie and a third place at a Scarecrow competition. His other worry, apart from the lack of racing, could be his own teammate, 22-year-old Egan Bernal. It's no secret that the Colombian is a climbing sensation, and he once again proved that last week by taking arguably his biggest win to date, the overall classification at the Tour de Suisse, backing up his Paris-Nice win from March. Now, admittedly, the field in Switzerland didn't have the strength in depth of the Dauphiné, but nevertheless, he looked every bit a Tour champion in the making. He proved himself to be the best climber in the race on stage 6, backed that up with a stage win the following day, and then defended himself admirably on the penultimate day's time trial. And he seemingly had no problem in following Rowan Dennis's attack on the final day of racing yesterday. So, the question is, who will lead Ineos at the Tour de France? Well, I'll be discussing that and the other Tour favourites a little bit later on. Other notable performances at the Tour de Suisse included Elia Viviani of De Koning Quick-Step, who bounced back from a disappointing Giro to take back-to-back wins on stages 4 and 5. That was after his team gave a demonstration on how to do the ultimate lead-out on both of those stages. Although to be fair, Trek Segafredo had done an equally good job of their lead-out on stage 3. Unfortunately for them though, it was to the benefit of Peter Sagan, who'd somehow managed to bump John Degenkolb off the wheel of his teammates, something the German, as you can imagine, was not very pleased about. For Sagan though, that was just his third win of the year so far, but he does look to be hitting his stride at just the right time. And then there is Rowan Dennis of Bahrain Merida, who has reignited his hopes of becoming a Grand Tour GC threat. He took his first win since becoming World Time Trial champion on the opening day's time trial, but if anything, it was his climbing that was the most impressive. He wouldn't quite be able to shake Egan Bernal, but he could certainly lay claim to being the best of the rest and would ultimately finish the race in the runner-up spots. It's going to be very interesting to see if he can back that performance up at the Tour de France this July. Jumbo-Visma also had reason to celebrate on stage 6 with the first World Tour win for Antoine Tolhoek, and so too did EF Education First on the final day. So keen was Hugh Carthy to start his summer holidays that he set off solo early on the final stage and was never seen again. It was the kind of long-range attack that we rarely see in the modern era, even less so a successful one. And what a thoroughly deserved win for a man who's extremely popular within the bunch, and also within the media in fact. He's got a real no-nonsense attitude to cycling and life, and in fact I think Carthy should be this week's GCN Rider of the Week. Meanwhile, some of the other sprinters were honing their form at the ZLM Tour up in the Netherlands, a race which was making its return after a 1-year absence. Dylan Groenewegen took his 8th and 9th wins of the season on the opening 2 road stages, but in the other sprint battle on the final day, Caleb Ewan got the better of him. That was, in fact, the only blemish in the race for Jumbo-Visma. They'd taken a clean sweep of the podium in the opening prologue, with Jos van Emden taking the honours there. Then, on stage 3, Amund Janssen scored a solo win in front of teammate Mike Tjernesen, who in turn went into the race lead, a lead, in fact, that he would keep through to the end. The Tour of Slovenia didn't have any of the Tour de France GC hopefuls participating, but it was the race that Mark Cavendish used to hone his form. Unfortunately, we didn't get to see him take part in any of the sprint stages, 1, 2 or 5. They were won by Pascal Ackermann, Luka Mezgec and Cav's teammate Giacomo Nizzolo respectively. Cavendish had just finished a heavy block of training coming into the race, but as he continues his return from the Epstein-Barr virus, his lack of results must surely be of concern to both he and his team Dimension Data, who've had a little to celebrate so far this season. The general classification was decided on stage 3, Diego Ulissi of UAE Team Emirates coming home solo, going into the leader's jersey in the process, a lead that he would also keep through to the end of the race. Now, one man that came out of that Tour of Slovenia with something to say was Mitchelton Scott's Matteo Trentin. The European champion was clearly frustrated with the proximity of the race motorbikes to the bunch. It is something which does come up time and time again as a topic of conversation, but little seems to be happening to resolve the problem. We ourselves, in fact, did a test a few years back to see the difference that a single motorbike can make to the effort needed to maintain a certain speed, and the results were even more surprising than I had expected. I'll link to that video at the end of this one. And the final preparation race for the Tour de France was the Route d'Occitanie, formerly the Route du Sud. 2 of the 4 days were won by Arnaud Démare, who has clearly come out of the Giro d'Italia with some great form. The general classification picture, though, had already been formed on the very opening day. Alejandro Valverde, the world champion, quashed speculation that he's on the decline by getting the better of another Giro participant, Eddie Dunbar of Team Ineos, before then finishing runner-up to Dunbar's teammate, Ivan Sosa, who took his first win of the season on stage 3. That marks Valverde's first GC win of the year so far. And so, with all of the preparation done, we can really start to speculate as to who is the favourite for the Tour de France. Without Froome, and the fact that Tom Dumoulin has confirmed that he won't participate, this could be the most exciting and open July that we have seen in years. For Team Ineos, the first decision will surely be, who are they going to protect? As defending champion, Geraint Thomas would be the natural leader, but his season has certainly not been plain sailing. They also have that leader in waiting in the form of Bernal, and although it will be just his second Grand Tour in his career, it's hard to imagine that he won't be protected through to the first mountains at least, perhaps with a free roll in the same vein as Thomas had last year. For the French, there is a huge opportunity. It's been 34 years since the last French winner of the race, but in Thibaut Pinot and Romain Bardet, they've got 2 genuine contenders. They have both finished on the podium previously. They've both built their seasons around this race too. For Bardet, there is still work to be done. He was far from his best at the Dauphiné, and the time trials are always going to be his Achilles heel. Pinot, meanwhile, has had a very consistent season, and if he manages to keep his head on, he's a really big threat. Ironically, you would say that this is the best opportunity ever for Richie Porte. Ironic in the fact that he's not been in the kind of form that we're used to seeing him in the lead up to the Tour de France, although that perhaps will be to his benefit. Movistar will once again have a 3-pronged attack. Nairo Quintana will hope to complete his collection of Grand Tours. Mikel Landa will hope to be set free to start his, whilst Alejandro Valverde was looking as lean as I've ever seen him at the Route d'Occitanie, and clearly in good form with it. Going on form alone though, you would have to put Jakob Fuglsang of Team Astana down as one of, if not the race favourite. He's really stepped it up another level this year, although my worry would be the fact that he's never finished on the podium of a Grand Tour before, so to win the Tour at the age of 34 would be somewhat out of the ordinary. Steven Kruijswijk is someone that you can never count out, but both he and Adam Yates were forced to withdraw from the Dauphiné on the very final day due to illness. Yates is an interesting one too, in fact. He finished very close to the podium of the Tour de France back in 2016. He too has built his season around a peak of form in July, and his team will no doubt get him off to a good start in the team time trial. EF Education First have a very strong team. Rigoberto Urán will be leading them with Mike Woods and TJ Van Garderen for backup. They've all been in great form of late, and between them they could pose a real threat too. And so too could Rowan Dennis, potentially. The Australian has been trying to transform himself into a Grand Tour contender for a couple of years now, and the way he rode at the Tour de Suisse suggests that he's getting close. So how on earth do you pick a favourite from those contenders? To be honest, I'm not sure you can. For me, there really is no clear favourite, but if I had to nail my colours to the mast, I'd have to go with Egan Bernal. Yes, he's young. Yes, he is relatively inexperienced, but he's just so talented. It's going to be really interesting to see, in fact, how Ineos play it, and Bernal himself has said that he'd go into the race to support Thomas, but I just think he's going to be like a caged rat, chomping at the bit to be let off the leash. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, in fact. Who is your personal favourite to win the Tour de France this year? You can let us know in the comments section below. We'll be recording our Tour de France preview show at the end of this week, so it'll be really interesting to get your consensus on the race favourites. Now, if you were with Marty last week for the Race News Show, you may remember that it was the youngsters from the British national team who dominated the opening days at the Giro Cyclist d'Italia, or the Baby Giro as it's affectionately known. Well, the Brits had to make way for yet another generation of Colombian climbers. The Italians also had their day with Fabio Mazzucco on stage 4, but as the race headed into the mountains, Team Colombia went on the offensive, likely sending the World Tour team managers scrabbling for their checkbooks. 20-year-old Andres Camilo Ardiles took back-to-back mountaintop victories on the Monte Amitata and the Passo Maneva summits, performances which gave him the leader's jersey. Juan Diego Alba gave the Colombians even more to shout about on stage 6, which he won from his teammate into Aprica. Fred Wright notched up another win for the Brits with a solo victory into Levico Terme with a phenomenal solo win there. The winner of the final stage, Aina Augusto Rubio, also did enough to move himself up to 2nd overall, whilst teammate Ardila added his name to a very elite list of previous winners at the race. And in fact, with Alba finishing up in 3rd on the GC, it was a clean sweep of the podium places for Colombian riders. Frightening prospect for all current and future pros. We're going to head over to the Asia Tour now for the 10th edition of the Tour de Filipinas. It was in fact the first UCI sanctioned road cycling race in the Philippines. 14 teams, 5 local and 9 international, competed in the 5-day race, which started in the city of Tagaytay and headed southwest to finish in the city of Legazpi, covering a total distance of 822 kilometres. Jeroen Meijers of Taiwan Myogi Cycling would establish a dominant lead in stage 1 of the race by not only finishing first with a 1 minute and 39 second gap over the second place rider, but by also bagging the jersey for the best sprinter and best climber as well. The chances for a Filipino rider to take the overall crown took a severe blow as local favourites from the Filipino national team, El Joshua Carino and Ronald Oranzo, dropped out of the race at the end of that first stage. That left the remaining local hopes on Filipino riders such as Marcelo Felipe of 711 Click Air 21. Stage 3 saw Samuel Hill from Team Nero Bianchi break clear from the pack in the last 10k to take his first UCI victory. And in fact, that team would double up the following day with Jesse Coyle using a late burst of speed to outstrip Team Sapura Cycling's Mohamed Scheifel Adlan Mod Shukri to the line. Meijers' lead, though, would prove to be insurmountable as he finished the Tour de Filipinos in 1st place after that first stage win. Filipino riders Marcelo Felipe and Marc Galedo finished in 11th and 15th place respectively in the individual general classification. Great to see the sport continuing to reach new corners of the globe though, isn't it? I know there are a lot of passionate cyclists over in the Philippines, so I'm sure it's not going to be too long before we see some big talent shine through on the international stage. In other news, it appears that Jumbo-Visma could offer Marcel Kittel a lifeline back into cycling. The German sprinter is currently taking a break from the sport for personal reasons, but could join up with his old coach at the Dutch squad. It'd be interesting to see how it would work in fact with Dylan Groenewegen though, who's proved himself as one of, if not the fastest sprinter in the world over the past couple of seasons. Speaking of Jumbo-Visma, congratulations to Primož Roglic and his partner Laura on the birth of their first baby. I wonder if someone knit a ski jumper for him. Meanwhile, the stars of the women's scene have been honing their form ahead of the Giro Rosa, which starts a week on Friday. Van Vleuten, Spratt and Lucinda Brand have been previewing a few of the key mountain stages, and I do love the fact that 2 potential rivals, Brand and Van Vleuten, are happy to recce and train together this close to a big objective like the Giro. Also, great to see Marianne Vos back in action after her nasty crash at the Over Energy Women's Tour last week. She took 2nd place at the European Games road race behind her teammate Lorena Vives on Sunday. Now, the UCI last week announced a whole host of changes in an effort to revitalise track cycling, but it's safe to say not everybody is happy about it. It was the UCI themselves who moved track cycling to the winter some years ago, but now they've decided to move it back to summer, but the changes certainly do not stop there. The current World Cup will be cut in half from 6 events down to 3 for the 2020 to 2021 season, when it will be renamed the Nations Cup and be held from July to September. It will also be exclusively for national teams. Part of the previous changes were that the UCI trade teams could compete on the track and the riders there scored points for their respective nations. There will also, though, be a new winter format soon to be unveiled, and the World Championships will move from March to October. Over the past couple of years, teams such as Beat Cycling from the Netherlands and Who What Bike have been racing with great success and have been a breath of fresh air to the sport. Who What Bike have been dominating the team pursuit and have launched the careers of the likes of Charlie Tanfield, who might not otherwise have caught the attention of the national team selectors. The guys from the People's Republic of Barbados had this response on Twitter, clearly and quite understandably frustrated by the news, whilst Theo Bos of the Netherlands couldn't understand the benefit of banning commercial teams from track World Cups. And it does seem to be a real shame for all those guys. Remember another plucky Brit who made his bike out of washing machine parts, took on the world only to upset the powers that be? Yep, Graeme Obree is one of the biggest stories ever to come from the world of track racing, and the Who What Bike guys have been hitting the headlines for upsetting the apple cart in a similar way. It's going to be a real shame if those opportunities are taken away from riders who aren't, for whatever reason, selected for their national team. Right, we're going to end this week with the race across America. There, former Paris-Roubaix winner Magnus Bagster and his team of amateur riders finished as first team in the 8-person open category. The big Swede was riding to raise money for military charities and also spent time training and coaching the rest of his team. And they raised, apparently, over £10,000. They crossed the line on Saturday after 3,069 miles and 5 days, 15 hours and 49 minutes of riding. The winner in the solo race was a name you'll probably recognise, Christoph Strasser, in a time of 8 days, 6 hours and 16 minutes, whilst Daniela Genovese and Isa Pulver also deserve mention. They were the solo winners in the women's 50 to 59 and under 50 age categories. Huge respect though for everybody who took part in that event. Very tough one indeed. That's all for now. Next week, it's National Championships week. We'll see which riders take their national colours into the biggest races of the year in both the time trials and the road races. In the meantime, if you would like to see just how much difference motos can make in cycling, you can click down here.